So our speaker tonight is Rich Bratten. Rich is here with his beautiful wife, Lori, and they are both LPR graduates. That's the Leadership Program of the Rockies. It's a program that a lot of us are familiar with. It's a really great program. The Principles of Liberty came about 3 years ago, just after the Republican Study Committee of Colorado, and which still exists. The RSCC still exists, but Principles of Liberty came out of that. And what they do is they grade our legislators and they grade the legislation on a set of libertarian principles. So we're really happy to have Rich Bratten here, and he's going to tell us about the Principles of Liberty. Come on up.
Yeah. All right, so my name is Rich Bratten, and I do run a group called Principles of Liberty. It was born out of what was called the Republican, or what is called the Republican Study Committee of Colorado. So I'm not a lifetime political person. All right, I had my political aneurysm, as I call it, in 2008. All right, 2008, I'm watching a debate between McCain and Obama, right? And so the question comes, what is a right? All right, of course, epic fail from our constitutional scholar and president. Is healthcare a right? Of course, he says, yes, it is. All right, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is, boom, clear differentiation, go McCain, and of course, I hear the chuckles already, right? We know how that worked out, right? Not very well. So my head explodes. So I get out, I'm literally, this is worse than a Broncos game, right? So I come back and I get on my computer, I download the federal, I'm an actuary, all right? So I'm a geek, I'm a numbers guy. A CFA, investment guy. I download the federal budget. Takes me about 3 hours, do some sensitivity testing. What happens if rates go up? What happens if revenue goes down? What blah, blah, blah. In 3 hours, smoke's coming out of the ears, and I figure out, we're screwed. There's just nothing mathematically, really, that you can do to get out of this, So I said, okay. And I've been to Washington a little bit, and, that kind of stuff. I'm like, I'm not getting involved at the federal level. All right, we've got to get involved at the state. So I realized that I've been doing a good job of voting, diligently see who should I vote for? Who's the best? But then I vote for them. And then I go back to work, right, on with my business. I go back to my family. And I come back 2 years later, and I'm like, what did you just do? Well, I thought I voted, So I realized this process is bad. So I realized, okay, we got to get more involved. And we got to watch what's going on every day. And that's a pain. That's a drag, right? None of us want to do that. We don't have the time. We don't have the resources. All right, so anyway, long story short, I got involved. We started getting involved politically. Next thing you know, my wife, an act of God. 3 days before session starts 4 years ago, she all of a sudden is Ted Harvey's legislative aide. Senator Ted Harvey from Douglas County. Don't ask me how it happened because I really couldn't tell you. But, we didn't even know him 2 weeks before that. Next thing you know, she's working down there. So I'm going down there. I'm hanging out. I'm getting to know some people. There's this RSCC, Republican Study Committee of Colorado. If you heard of the RSC, the national version of the RSC, Republican Study, RSCC is a state version. So I became the executive director of that. I started analyzing bills. My first big project, I said, hey, guys, let's do this. Let's analyze legislation like the national does, and let's analyze it according to your principles of the RSCC on your website. So I started doing that. Funny things started happening. We had a one-person majority in the House at the time, okay, right, 33-32. And, of course, we're in a minority in the Senate. We start passing out these floor reports. A lot of people love them. This is really helpful. This is great. Well, a few of the bills here and there run by Republicans maybe weren't so good, right? And we would, Senate Bill 200, okay, right? Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a lot of nominations, all right? So, and we would point that out. Well, then we started getting huge pushback. Long story short, big problem with the Republicans, okay? How dare you say something isn't perfect, So moved out of there and created Principles of Liberty. So that's what we do. What we do is we read every single bill, or at least the summary of every single bill. Some of them are long. Most of them are pretty short. We read every single bill. I got volunteers. I'm always recruiting. Anybody here who likes policy and is wonky, call me, email me. I have cards. You can be one of our analysts. We read every single bill that gets run at the state. How many bills do you think are run at the state? Too many. Too many. Okay, there's one vote. Anybody else? How many bills do you think, pieces of legislation get run at the state? We've got over 500. Who else? 200. Anybody else? 50. Anybody else? 100. Anybody else? 700, 600. Anybody else? All right. About 650 a year. Here's what happens. You got 100 legislators down there, right? We have 65 in the House and 35 in the Senate. They all get to run 5 bills. Guess how many bills they all run? Absolutely. So there's 500, no-brainer right there. Bam. All right, in addition to that, they get late bills, they get special dispensation, et cetera, et cetera. You end up with about 650 bills a year. All right, so we read them all. We rate them based on clearly defined principles, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Because the question is, well, who says you've got the right principles, right? Your principles might be different than mine. So that's the conversation we're going to have now. So even though I'm an actuary and a geeky guy, I used to be a high school math and physics teacher and basketball coach, so don't mess with me. I'll go all Bobby Knight on you, because that's back in my day. All right. I got a chair. I'm not afraid to use it. All right. For those of you who know Bobby Knight basketball, Indiana basketball. You know what? I am embarrassed to say this is the first year I haven't done one. My bracket. No. And too busy reading legislation. I swear. All right. So, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to be interactive. So, let me just describe real quick what we do. We read legislation. We read every bill. We have our principles. All right. We have a grid and we grade. You know, when we read a bill, we have a grid and we teach our people. We do a training session, so we teach them how to rate legislation. And then we say, this is a good bill because it supports this principle, this principle, this principle. Or this is a bad bill because this bill goes against this one or this one or this one. All right, what are our principles in a nutshell? Individual liberty, personal responsibility. All right, there's your first two. We have property rights and free markets. All right, there's your 3 and 4. We have limited government and fiscal responsibility. And there's 5 and 6. Those are the 6 that we use most often. Okay, we have a couple more. I'll read them off to you a little bit. So, the question is, where do your principles come from? Because what happens is people get elected to the legislature, and my wife works for Senator Harvey, who's in Douglas County, and Senator Kent Lambert, who is out of Colorado Springs. So she's down there every day. And if you're on Facebook, follow her. You'll get the blow-by-blow of what's going on down there. If you want to know what's going on down in the Capitol, follow her on Facebook. It's Laurie, L-A-U-R-I-E, Bratten, B-R-A-T-T-E-N, Laurie Bratten. Follow her. You'll get the blow-by-blow. That's dangerous. It's like giving somebody a loaded gun. All right. So where did our principles come from? And we're going to talk about that. Just did you know our principles? I'd say the three major parties. Most talk about parties agree on almost all of our principles. Every one of our principles can be found in the Republican Party platform. I have color-coded copies of it. All right. Where I highlight the colors and I highlight our principles, and here's where they show up in the Republican Party platform. Every single one of our principles are in the Libertarian Party platform. All right, every single one. I'm speaking for the second or third year in a row at the Libertarian Party State Convention. All right, even though I am registered as a Republican. I have a ton of great Libertarian friends. All but about 2 of the principles aren't in the Democratic Party platform. The 2 that aren't, here are the 2. And out of the 6 that I said. So what would you guess the 2 are? Remember the 6? Property rights. Thank you. There's one. And free markets, although that springs from property rights. It's actually in there. Fiscal responsibility, you're close. What was the other government one, if you remember it? Limited government. Yes. So if you remember, we had individual liberty, personal responsibility. We had property rights, free markets, because property rights are the basis of free markets. So property rights, they got an issue with. And Limited government fiscal responsibility. The word limited appears, I think it's 6 times. You just download the PDF and do a word search, right? You find the word limited. Every time the word limited is found in a Democratic Party platform, it only refers to limited greenhouse gases, limiting carbon emissions, limiting something like that. That's the only time they use the word limited in their party platform. All right? And then the only time they use the word property, right? They never ever use the word property followed by the word right. Never. Doesn't exist in their party platform. The only time they use the word property is for intellectual property. And the only time I think it's in there 3 times. And all 3 times that you find the phrase intellectual property, it's in the context of we must protect our intellectual property from China. It's the only time that they recognize the word property in their platform. So those are some of the differences. But other than that, there's a lot of overlap with our principles. Okay? So let's start with this. If we're going to define our principles, we've got to define some basic concepts. What's a right? And this is where we get all interactive. Don't make me walk around out there with this court. All right, so what's a right?
Something God-given that a government cannot give or take away, even if they legislate against it.
Okay, that's a long definition, but okay. So it's God-given. Okay. Inherent. Okay, yeah, what about my objectivist friends, right? All right, come on.
Moral sanction of the action of our lives to survive.
A moral sanction of the action of our lives to survive. I have not heard that one in any of my training classes, Mike Ebrock. All right, other idea, come on. All right, let me ask you this. What do you hear attached to rights? For example, you hear civil rights. All right, what other kind of rights do you hear about? Constitutional rights, whatever the rights do you hear about in the media today? The right to health care, gay rights. What else do you hear? Women's rights. Thank you. Keep going. Come on. What's that? Minority rights. Thank you. Come on. Environmental rights. What else? Animal rights. Okay, what else? Right to life. How else do you hear your word right used? Come on. Right-wing consumer. All right. How about inalienable or unalienable? I get somebody who keeps emailing me, and I keep using the word inalienable incorrectly. Apparently, it should be unalienable, so whatever. Okay, natural rights, human rights, civil rights, economic rights, all those kind of things. What defines a right? What's a right? And then we had one definition, but to you, what's the acid test? Is healthcare a right?
No.
Why is healthcare not a right?
It's a claim on the labor or service or product of another.
Okay, so healthcare is a claim on the product or services of another. Bob?
It's a good.
The healthcare is a good, right. So what is a right then?
Something intrinsic.
Something intrinsic. Thank you. What else?
Something that can't infringe on someone else.
Something that can't infringe on somebody else's right. I mean,
It's natural.
it's natural. What does that mean? I just ate a natural burger, but I hope.
It cannot assert a claim on someone else.
Right.
It's free.
Right. So a right, so you have the concept of what is a right? What's a right? Because we're going to move next into what's the role of government. So a right, for me, the acid test, a simple test is to say a right is something that does not depend upon somebody else for its provision. All right? To me, that's the simple way to look at it. It is something that doesn't depend on your money being given to me. A right is something that doesn't depend on you providing a service or product for me. A right is something that exists because I exist. My right to free speech, my right to defend myself. You can't give that to me, and I don't depend on you for those things. So to me, that's a simple way to talk about the rights. But you got to remember the language of the left. All right, the left has a different view of rights, or progressives has a different. What are their rights? Healthcare rights, right? Needs, what you deserve, equality. Ending in equality, equality of outcomes. What else? All right? Rights to my property, absolutely, right. Right? Eminent domain, the rights for what? For the social good, for the common good.
The key thing there, though, is they keep using that word, but I don't think it means what they think.
Right, that's right. So, how many of you are familiar with FDR's Economic Bill of Rights? All right, raise your hands if you are familiar. All right, raise your hands if you're not familiar. This will blow you away. And normally I do a PowerPoint, and I'm going to blow through a ton of stuff. And I had people say, man, FDR was a hero in my house growing up. I have never seen this. All right. FDR's Second Bill of Rights, it was called, or the Economic Bill of Rights in 1944. The right to a useful and remunerative job in industries or shops or farms or mines of the nation. So the right to a job. The right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation. Yeah. All right. The right of every farmer to raise and sell his products. The right of every businessman to trade in an atmosphere of freedom from unfair competition and no monopolies. The right of every family to a decent home. I mean, you've heard of this, right? A pot in every kettle, a car in every garage, right? Right? That chicken, whatever. A pot in every kettle. I'm really trying to go too fast. Chicken in every pot, whatever. All right. The right to adequate medical care. All right. The right to adequate protection from old age, sickness, accident, and unemployment. And the right to a good education. Those were FDR's Economic Bill of Rights in 1944. Guess what? Let me go back 8 years from there. This is from 1936. Here's a different set of rights. This set of rights in 1936 can be found in the longest-lasting constitution that survived, the longest period of time in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR. Here's their constitution. Chapter 10. Rights and duties of citizens, Article 118. Citizens of the USSR have the right to work, guaranteed employment and payment for their work. All right. They also have the right to rest and leisure. All right. We're going to do this by working only 7 hours a day. They also have the right to full pay. They have the right to rest homes, sanatoria, and clubs for recreation. They have the right to maintenance in old age. All right. They have the right to free medical service. And I'm just reading straight from the Soviet Constitution. All right. They have the right to education, etc. Do those two things sound pretty similar? Yeah. There's nothing different there. Okay. So why do I bring that up? The left, or the progressive, has a different concept of rights than an individualist or a libertarian or a liberty person has. All right? Because they believe that rights can be in a collective form, and they're granted, right, through a collective coercive government. So it's important to understand what your concept of rights and how that's differentiated from the left's, because when you're arguing over an issue, you got to understand that. So what's the role of government?
Protect our rights.
Protect what?
Your individual rights.
Protect our rights. What else?
Defend liberty.
Defend liberty. Okay, what else?
Protection of borders.
The protection of what?
State.
Of the state. Is that, and I'm looking for proper role of government here. What else?
Get out of my way.
What? I'm sorry, what? Enforce contracts, okay?
Natural law. Protect the citizens from harming each other and have a way to adjudicate contract disputes.
All right, protect citizens from each other and adjudicate contract disputes. Anything else? What's the role of government? Pensions for government employees. I'm not saying what is the government doing. I'm saying what is the, maybe I forgot to insert this word, proper. What is the proper role of government?
Secure, protect individual rights and full stop.
Okay, what's that?
To leave us alone.
To leave us alone? Look, I've been accused of being an anarchist, and of course, I think everybody in this room probably has a better, more familiar understanding of what anarchy is. A lot of my friends, think anarchists are basically people burning down buildings and throwing rocks through windows, and I explain to them, no, there's a continuum of state, and there's a continuum of free market, and basically an anarchist, and my very simplified definition to my friends is, an anarchist is somebody who believes that the free market can provide a solution for every single issue with respect to the interaction of people. Right, whether it's adjudication of contracts via arbitration, whether it's security via private security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if that's on one end, then you have your minarchist, your anarcho-capitalist, and yada, 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 and you get over here to your statist, okay, your totalitarian. So for us, the question is, how do you define what's the role of government? All right, and for me, real quick, and the reason I'm going through this background is to say, here's a process that we've gone through at POL, Principles of Liberty. And here's how we've determined our principles, and this is the mindset we use when we analyze legislation. And then I'm going to show you how it gets applied at the Capitol. All right? So I'm trying to go really fast. But for us, protect life, liberty, and property. You're done. Okay? So if you acknowledge that there is a role for some government, all right, and I fully recognize the argument that there is an argument that there is no role for government at all, and I get that, I understand that, and I'm very conversant on that as well. But if you agree that there's a role of government, what we've defined, used as our basis and our platform for our principles is the role of government is to protect life, liberty, property. That's it. No mas. Okay? So the third concept I'll talk about before I tell you about what, specifics. How many of you are familiar with the concept of the initiation of force? Okay, good. All right. So the libertarians, and I talked to a bazillion libertarians, and they don't know the concept, which means to me that they don't really fundamentally understand libertarianism. All right. Libertarianism is based on the concept of initiation of force. All right. It is, when is it moral to initiate force on others? All right. All right. If I walk up to this guy and I pull out, somebody said we're giving away Glock. I pull out my Glock 36. Does that get me into the drawing? All right. I pull out my Glock 36 and I stick my gun into his ear and I say, give me $20 because there's a guy out here on a corner that needs to eat. And I'm going to go give him go give that to him. Would that be a moral initiation of force upon him? Yes or no? Come on, guys. This is not a tough one. Come on. Don't make me come out there. Yeah, so bingo. Somebody mentioned before, yeah, I happen to carry around Bastiat with me all the time, too. Thank you. All right, so Bastiat is very clear on this subject. He does a great job on it. Great book, Bastiat the Law. Is it moral for me to initiate force on this guy, to give $20 to that guy? And of course, the answer is no. And Bastiat says very clearly, well, if it's immoral for me to do it as an individual, what makes it moral for government to be able to do that precisely the same thing? Okay? And that is one of the fundamental things. Read Bastiat, just the first half of it, really, will get you what you need out of Bastiat. So, when is it moral to initiate force? This is a concept that many of our legislators don't understand. They've never heard of. They don't understand it. And these are the very guys that have their fingers on the trigger of the force. And they don't grasp this concept. It is a force which should be wielded incredibly judiciously. All right? Not for rent seekers or other things like that. All right, so individual liberty, personal responsibility, property rights, free markets, limited government, fiscal responsibility. The other principles I didn't mention, state versus federal balance of power. That's one of our principles. All right, the powers of the federal government are few and enumerated. Powers left to the states are broad and undefined. Now, that's a bit scary. I've got the Colorado Constitution in there, and just think of California, right? I mean, the powers left to the states are broad and undefined, as long as it's a Republican, form of government. But we very much advocate for state power, and not states' rights. People have rights. States' powers versus federal government. That's one of our principles. Finally, equal protection or rule of law. There are a lot of laws or pieces of legislation that continuously get run to favor some people over others. All right? And you just see this and you say, we're going to make crimes against homeless persons. This was an actual bill run. We're going to make crimes against homeless persons triple damages and triple penalties as opposed to crimes against somebody who has a home. Right? This is actual legislation. So, well, because we gotta protect the homeless or the elderly or whomever we feel like protecting today. And so we're going to make a crime against mugging a homeless person 3 times as long in jail as a crime against mugging my wife. Okay? That would be an example for us of how something that violates the principle of equal protection or equal application of the rule of law. So, and then uphold the constitutions. So what we do is we read every bill, we apply each of these things, and then we rate the legislation. And then we just give a simple report. You can go to our website, principlesofliberty.org. So we're doing all this work, all right, free for you. So if you've ever been like, man, I really want to I want to know what's going on down there, but I just don't know. You don't have an excuse anymore. Go to our website. It's free. I don't take any money. I don't take any dollars. I don't do anything. I don't want to be subject to federal election crapola regulations and filing for this and filing for that. I detest, all right, being regulated, and I'm not going to exercise my free speech. So no tips, no money, no nothing. It's just strictly volunteer. All right? Go to our website, and you can read our analysis on we rate about 200 and something a year. You want to find out what's going on? Go there. Again, you follow Laurie on Facebook, you'll find out she's working, she's just Facebooking from the floor of the Senate every day. All right? Somebody wants to work in the House next year, let me know. We'd love to get somebody doing the same thing on the House. Okay? So, speaking of the government, how many of you know what the process is down there? Down at the state. Sausage making. Well, how does that sausage get made? All right, here's the quick story. We got a Senate, right? And we have a House. So the House of Representatives has 65 people in it. Democrats are in the majority. We have a Senate, has 35 people in it. Democrats are in the majority. That's important because if you're in the majority, you get to fill every committee with majorities. So on the House side, there's a bunch of committees. Local government, business, education, whatever. They all have Democrat majorities because they're in a majority. Same thing on the Senate. All right, got the Senate side. So here's what happens. I run a bill. I have seen some terrible puppy kicking going on, and by God, we're going to run a bill to stop that. I'm going to run a bill to outlaw puppy kicking. So I'm going to run it in, let's say, the House. So they read it across the desk. There's one. It has passed 3 times. The House Speaker sends it to a committee, and they'll have a committee hearing on it. This is when you get to come down to the Capitol to testify if you want to. Speak for puppy kicking. Hey, it is a stress reliever. You are taking away. You're going to cause mental health costs to skyrocket if you prevent me from kicking. If you prevent people from kicking puppies. Hey, you can make an argument for anything down there. Trust me. All right. So it goes to a committee. You can come in and testify. Now, all of this stuff you can watch online because I get this too, especially with my West Slope friends. I can't spend the whole day at the Capitol. You don't have to. You can watch it online. You can listen to it online. Even better yet, if you don't want to sit there and listen to it, which I don't, you can go online and I can show you there on the website. It's a government website. This is the legislative website of the state of Colorado. You can go on and find the cliff notes. Here's what happened in committee. Here's all the people who came in and testified, whether they're for or against. Here's what everybody said, blah, blah, blah. Boom. You can read it in 5 minutes. You're done. So you don't have to come to the Capitol to find out what's going on. Just go to the website, and I can talk about that later. So it goes to committee. Everybody talks about puppy kicking. People are for it. People are against it. They vote for it. Yeah, this is a good bill. All right, great. So now it goes back could go to another committee. It goes back to the House for the second time. Then they vote on it, or then they argue about it. That's seconds. You can watch that one on TV or the internet. That's when they debate. They argue about it. Oh, I'm for puppy kicking. No, you should be able to kick just some puppies. Whatever. All right. So then they argue, and then they'll vote. Now that vote's not recorded. Then they all vote. Everybody that says in favor, aye, aye. Everybody says no, no. If you've ever seen, whoever's in charge, whoever's got the thing, they get to say who won. So, all right, let's do it right now. All right, everybody who is in favor of this law that we've just debated in seconds, pretend you're in the House. Everybody who's in favor of this law against puppy kicking, say aye. Aye. Everybody who's opposed to this puppy kicking protection bill, say no. No. Ayes have it. Doesn't matter. It could be, all right, how about this way? Everybody who's in favor of instituting Bitcoin as legal tender in the state of Colorado, say aye. Aye. Everybody who's opposed to using Bitcoin, say no. No. No's have it. That's what they do. I mean, that's what they get to do. All right, so, but let's say they pass. Okay, so it passes seconds. Now you go to thirds. In theory, it's supposed to lay over 24 hours. And then so it comes back to thirds, still in the House. This is the third time. And now they vote on it, and it's official. And they push their red button or their green button, and it gets recorded. And that's final. That's their final vote, thirds. So now you've gone across the desk, got out of the committee, got through seconds, got through thirds. Now what? Goes to the Senate. Does the exact same process. Now the Senate president sends it to one of his committees. They argue about it. You get to come and testify again if you want to. They vote on it. Then they send it back to the Senate floor for seconds. They debate about it. Then they get laid over, and then they vote on it in thirds. If they pass it there, it generally becomes law. I mean, I'm not going to get into there's some details, but it becomes law. So that's a process. Okay? So what we try to do is we rate every bill before, hopefully, before it even goes to the first committee. We are not an issues group at Principles of Liberty. All right? We are a principles group. We're the only one that I know of, not only in the state, but in the country. We're looking to replicate the model across the country. What's the difference between an issues group and a principles group? We're not about issues. We're not about guns, much as I love guns. We're not about babies, much as I love babies. We're not about marijuana. I'm not going to say that. I really didn't even mean to imply that. No. My son is here too. He's a senior, from Valor Christian. It just came out that way. All right. Going to MIT. I'm proud of him. He's a good boy, smart boy. My son over here, Cody. Hey, Cody. All right. So we're not about issues. We're about the principles. And what's the difference? Well, the question is how do you apply your principles to the issue in question? How do you apply your principles to the issue of whatever, of property rights? And then I get people who say, well, you should, rate bills, this property right bill on pipeline eminent domain is much more important than this HOA or this weed, control problem over here. That's a very small. No, the principle applies regardless of the issue. Granted, this issue might be a much bigger issue than that one, but I'm not talking about issues. We talk about principles. So we try to clearly define our principles. We have a very specific rubric, if any of you have had kids who come up in Colorado school, a rubric, a method, an algorithm for reading a bill, checking off your lists, and then applying that to legislation. So we're about principles, not about issues. So, all right, so I talked about the legislative process, talked about reading the bill. Where do I want to go with this? We rate bills. You can get on our report, and you guys know, your guys' head would explode if we actually analyze legislation. If you want a chance to get the full training, come to one of our training sessions. We've done half a dozen from Grand Junction to Greeley to Colorado Springs to Denver to Evergreen to wherever. And we will do an 6-hour training on how we come up with our principles and then how we apply them to legislation and then et cetera. All right, so let me wrap this thing up with, so we get this information out to the legislators before committee. That's the other thing. We're not a group that comes in after the legislative session is over and said, hey, we're going to pick these 30 bills and rate you on them. Because what happens there? People say, oh, well, you're just cherry picking bills, right? You're just picking bills to make somebody look good or somebody look good. No, we rate them all before they go to committee, before anybody starts voting on them. Here's our opinion on them. Okay, and here's why. We rated last year 238 bills. When you apply the number of bills times the number of principles times the number of times those things got voted on, we come up with a data set of over 43,000 data points. Why is that helpful? That's actuaries would call that a statistically significant data set. Okay? Because what we're looking for is an opportunity to identify trends and make relative comparisons. Okay? So at the end of the session, we end up with a scorecard. Now this is the thing that really makes, people's heads explode. Generally people who score badly. The people who score well, really, I think this is okay. But what we're looking for is a way to identify trends and make relative comparisons. The goal of Principles of Liberty is not to rate legislators. It's not our goal. It's a byproduct of what we do. The goal of Principles of Liberty is to have a cogent, rational conversation about what is the role of government and how are you applying it as a legislator at the state capitol. And it's to equip you to be able to have that conversation with them, with each other, with your neighbors, or with anybody. So that's the goal of Principles of Liberty. If all of our legislators are talking about what principle are we applying here, and is this the role of government, and is this the best way to do it, then I have fulfilled my mission. And I can quit doing this crap and go back to life. right? We need to get to that point. It's only going to get to that point if you get to that point and you push that point with those guys. You know, I had one legislator who, I don't need you to tell me how to be a good conservative. You know, and I was like, I just laugh. I'm like, dude, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to educate every single one of your constituents so that they can tell you how to be a good conservative or vote your butt out. Right? So, 43,000 data points. So here's the thing. I can't rig the game. I can't tell you ahead of time who's doing well, who's not doing well. It is complicated. All right, I get about 450 data points per person. And we rate them by principle. Here's your score on individual liberty. Here's your score on personal responsibility. Here's your score on, we rate them all. All right, not issue. And then we have an aggregate score. So then I get people, now here's the one thing that's a challenge for me. People want simple. So I put grades on it. I got to put grades on it. A, B, C, D, and blah, 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 right? People got to see a grade. Because God forbid you give them a page full of numbers and they, you know, with me, I'm an actuary. I'm like, yeah. All right. But, you know, most people are like, I need grades. All right. I'm struggling with the whole grade thing because it oversimplifies the process. All right. Because here's the deal. In my mind, if you get an 80% or better, all right, so that means you and I agree, you know, a legislator and I agree, or not me personally, but I mean our team agrees 80% of the time or better, that's a win. I like that person, politically speaking. I like them all. They're all nice people. All right? Some are nicer than others. All right. If you're between a 70 and an 80, you know, I can live with that. You know, yeah, look, you see, get up higher. All right, but I can live with that. Now, if you're between 65 and 70, all right, that to me, in my numbers, you know, you need an intervention here. And you need to figure out which side you're on. And maybe you're redeemable, and maybe there's progress that can be made, and then maybe you just need some education, and you need more constituents talking to you about, well, why did you vote this way? Because this is voting against property rights. They're not used to people talking to them like that way. And we'll start making them think, some of them. So 6570 might be bad, might be salvageable. I don't know. But that's your job as constituents, right? Now, as a former teacher, I know a little bit about evaluation. As a mathematician, I know a little about statistics. So in my mind, that 70% cutoff, at 70%, you've demonstrated to a statistically significant degree that you have some grasp of the material at 70%, right? I mean, I think, would we agree with that? I mean, at 70%, you would say, yeah, that person's, he's got the idea, at least, you know. I mean, we like it higher. 65, 70, all right, get below 65. In my mind, that's not a demonstrable difference from 50. And I can replace, or you can replace, a 50% legislator with a monkey and a coin. Right? So what good is that? All right, so that's kind of my cutoff. All right, so that's how I view the scores. So let me wrap up by saying how were the scores? Here's the key, again, identify trends. Senate Republicans, and this is in 2013, Senate Republicans on principles of liberty scored between 42%. Yeah, oh, that's right. 42% and 80%. Last year, honestly, was kind of a bad year for the Senate, in my mind. The year before, I think their high score was 90. Right? But last year, Senate Republicans were between 42 and 80. That's a huge range. The proverbial herding cats, right? Are those guys all locked down and doing the same thing? No, 42 to 80, that's a 40-point spread. So 40% spread on the Democrat side on that side, on the Senate. Guess what the spread was on the Democrat scores? If you know, don't say. Let people guess. 6. All right? Any other guesses? 10? Okay. Yeah, the biggest spread. The spread between the lowest Democratic score and the highest Democratic score. From 10 to 70, okay? No, they can't go below 0. Okay, 10 to 50. Those are reasonable guesses. So usually it's somewhere between 10 to 45 or so. All right. Last year in the Senate, they were all between 8 and 12%. That's on 450 data points per person. Now, if I get the time this summer, and if I go to the next level and create this database that we might be doing, I want to go back and evaluate every single vote that they've made. And I think that if I do this, I'll be able to statistically prove that there's a 99.99% refutation of if you're familiar with statistics, that would refute the hypothesis that happened by chance. In other words, somebody's making the decisions over there, and they are all voting the exact same thing. And it's not by chance. And I could pretty much prove it mathematically. Or prove that there's a very low probability of that. I mean, if you think that happened by chance, you probably go to Vegas every weekend. All right? Because you believe in lady luck. All right. On the House side, scores for Republicans range from 50% to 95%. Justin Everett scored 95. 6 of the top 7 scorers in the House last year for Republicans were newbies. They were freshmen. All right? Got to send them reinforcements. All right? I mean, they were good. Democrats in the House, same thing, 8 to 12. There was one outlier, one crazy Democrat who had a 17.7. But other than that, seriously, other than that, all more 8 to 12. All right? On the Senate side, the Senate leadership, there are 4 positions of leadership on the Senate. There's a Senate president and blah, 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 top 1, 2, 3, 4 guys. Those guys tended to score in the top half of the Senate, that's a good sign. On the House side in 2013, 3 of the 4 scored not just in the bottom half, but easily in the bottom third on the House. There's a huge chasm in the House. Okay? There was one, and I have to always give her props, because she finished 10th, I think, on the House side. Libby Szabo is the one person in leadership who scored well. Right? So those are the trends that I like to identify to people. And this last year was extraordinary in the results. Extraordinary in how locked down Democrats were. So when you hear somebody saying, hey, I'm going to run because I can work across the aisle with people, I can build bridges, I can make compromises, and I can yada, yada, yada. Do you think that these people who've all voted between 8 and 12% have any intention of compromising with you in any way whatsoever? No, they don't. That's reality. But you're welcome to compromise with them. So anyway, so that's kind of the trends that we identify with our data. Again, it's a significant set of data. Some of the things I get is, hey, you guys don't weight bills, because this bill is more important than that bill. Because we're not issues, principles. Every principle counts every time, whether you're applying it to dog kicking or to property rights. Okay? You don't show all the data in your scorecard. Yeah, get over it. Look, I got better things. I spend so much time on this stuff, it's insane. I can show it to you. People will email me and ask me for a report on somebody. Great, I'll pull a report and I'll create a report for you. I mean, we're totally transparent. All of our checklists for every bill we post on our website. Your grading scale is arbitrary. Well, I already told you how I feel about that. The grades, I go by percentages. Some people tell me, you're too libertarian. I don't see life on there. I don't see babies on there. I don't see whatever, right? Not issues, principles. You decide how you want to apply that principle to that issue, right? I got other friends say, you're too Republican. Good, same answer to those guys. But you don't understand. I get this from my legislative friends all the time. You don't understand. When you hear that one, just start, just start pulling out your BS flag right there and just start throwing it, because here it comes. All right. If you can do one thing when you're talking to any political person, me included, and that is this. In your mind, you must keep this question in your mind when their lips are moving. And that is, how does it benefit you? How does it benefit you, Rich Bratten, if I believe what you're telling me? All right, and if you can get that question just burned into your mind and ask yourself that question whenever you're talking to any of these guys, how does it benefit you? I believe what you're telling me. That will help you a lot when you're dealing with folks down there. All right, so I've given you a kind of very high level of what we do at POL. We do a ton of load.
Better than a ton of thought.
Better than a ton of work. We are a free resource. Sign up for our website, for our emails. You'll just get one once a week, unless we have a special report to send out. That's it. We're not spamming anybody. We're not doing anything that kind of stuff. And you only get stuff during the session. If you want to find out how we're rating legislation, email me if you want to be a volunteer. Email me if you want to do training. Email me if you got a question about a legislator or a candidate. All right, hey, I got a question. Why is this guy's score so low? Well, here's the deal with that guy. He's pretty good here, here, and here. And here are the bills he voted against. You make a decision on what you think about that. It's your call. But we can provide you with that kind of information. Happy to do that. Let me open it up for questions because I want to honor our time. Yes, sir.
Rich, it seems to me that there's a great opportunity in all the towns that we all live in. And if we were to take something like you're doing in Principle of Liberty on the town level, by the time these folks decide to run for state, maybe they'll get in their head principles. So how would one go about doing something in the People's Republic of Boulder or the People's Republic of Erie or Broomfield or whatever?
Great question. So the question there is basically, how do we build a bench for the state? And it's funny you should say that because my goal with POL is to build a bench, for our state at the state level. And, hopefully people will go on and start reclaiming our powers as a state at the federal level. Same concept. So how do we do that? Take the principles that we do, come to one of our trainings, devise your own principles. Look, we're open source code, okay, is my perspective here for those of you programmers. Meaning, take my stuff, please. Make it better, please. Rewrite pieces of it. Do whatever you want with it. It's not mine. It's ours. Take it and apply it in your situation. Devise your own principles. Go to your groups that are in your cities or Boulder or wherever, and start your own group. All right, or latch onto us for a year, see what we're doing, and then figure out how to do it yourself. Because you're right, we need to apply it. All of this applies at the local level. School boards, county commissioners, sheriffs. All right, some of the scaredest I've ever been in my adult life is sitting down there and listening to testimony to some of these DAs down there. My gosh, do they want to take away every right you've got for your own protection, of course. Man, I'm not kidding. So, yes, sir.
How do you handle amendments and judging whether or not they're significant? Do you change your ratings as a consequence?
Great question. How do we follow a bill when it gets amended, and do we change our ratings, et cetera? We do follow them. We don't follow all of them real closely, but it's gotten to the point now, this is our 4th year of rating legislation, where I depend on legislators to let me know, hey, this bill's a strike below. The strike below means they took the bill. In Colorado, a bill can only be about one thing, in the title, puppy kicking. You can't insert a thing about cats into that bill, okay? Unlike our federal legislation, which is why it's so screwed up. We're a single subject state. So when you run a bill, it can only be about one thing. And so when a strike below means they literally wiped everything off, and they used that same title and they wrote a different law. They wrote a different bill. So when I get strike belows, we research from the ledge page, and because we follow the committees. So we go and we check the committee reports and see what happened in committee, and we see if it was significantly amended or not. So we do try to follow them. Do we go back and track all 200 of them daily? No, of course not. But we do depend on other people. And I do have people down at the Capitol, like the tall blonde over there, and among others, who keep track of stuff. So, other questions?
And we love it when people call us, because a lot of you, I know, like Susan Kochevar, some other people, definitely are watching specific bills, and they will absolutely text us when they see amendments come across that significantly change a bill or would change our rating, and let us know, as do legislators who are very motivated to do the right thing, who get our reports every Monday morning before they go to caucus.
And we've gotten to the point where legislators will contact us before they even run a bill. Which is good, right? The goal is to have that conversation. The goal isn't, hey, here's principles of liberty, and we got it all. This is government coming down. Here's a stone tablet. Here you go. No, the goal is just to have that conversation. If they're open to having a conversation, man, we've won, right? And we need, all of you to be involved with that. So, other questions? Yes, sir.
You talked about constitutional. Do you rate them against the Colorado Constitution? And as messy as that is, isn't that pretty difficult if you do?
Yes. And the question is how do we rate them against the Colorado Constitution? We read it, all right, and we study it, we underline it, we highlight it, and we also have a few legislators who are really good. I mean, there are some good guys down at the state, particularly on the Senate side, and there's good ones on the House now. But I mean, the seasoned guys on the Senate side, those guys know this thing really well. I mean, I'll be talking to Kevin Lundberg, and that guy will just tell you it's article, section, whatever, blah, 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 because he knows it. So good question. And here's another, which leads to another question. What if there's something in the Constitution that you don't like? I mean, the problem, or the challenge, all right, with the state is you can amend this sucker by referendum or petition, right? So, I mean, you'd be California, right? Their Constitution says certain things. Our Constitution says certain things, right, that you might not agree with in principle.
And some of them are contradictory.
And some of them are contradictory. So that's a great question. Hey, do you guys remember there was an incident a couple years ago where a legislator got pulled over down in Denver? It was during session, and there was some consternation that supposedly that legislator had used legislative privilege, which is granted in the Constitution, which says you can't be arrested when you're in session and going to or from. Anybody remember that? All right. Did you know you have that same thing? No.
No, get this. Find it.
Citizens have the same thing.
You have the same right here.
Privilege of voters. Article 7, Section 5. I always like this because it's like, all right. Privilege of voters. Voters shall in all cases, except for treason or felony or disturbing peace, breach of peace, all right, be privileged from arrest during their attendance at elections and in going to or returning from elections. Okay. So, does that mean that Rich Bratten, Mr. Anarchist, is out promoting crime sprees on the way to the election polls? No, it doesn't. I just point that out. There's little things in this Constitution that are pretty funny, actually.
It doesn't count towards the caucus and assembly process going to and from those.
Probably. It's an election. All right. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Rich, you provide an incredible amount of information on individual legislators. You score each one of them. Are you planning to automate that process such that you don't have to intervene every time? I want to know why such people as Greg Brophy's got a C rating on your schedule. What does that constitute without sending you an email?
Right. That's a good question. So, a particular legislator, like last year he had a 92%, or 90 or 92. He was 2 points. He was in second place last year, or the year before in 2012. So the question is how can I find out more about a legislator and what their voting record means without having to contact me? And the answer is yes, Russ. We are in conversations with some people in terms of trying to create an online database, real-time, with real-time scoring for next session. So I have some, so I'll just leave it at that. That's a potentiality for next year. Other questions?
Which brings up another question.
Yes,
You're
sir.
not going to wait it for election years, are you?
No, we don't wait it. We don't. The numbers are what they are, man. The numbers are what they are. You can't run from. Yes, sir.
So you are rating the votes of these legislators?
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
everyone.
Does that include the committee votes?
Yes. Good question. We take the first committee vote. I can't track them all. The first one, the first committee of assignment, and then also the floor vote. So a legislator can have 2 votes on a bill. My puppy kicking bill. Let's say it's a property rights bill, and let's say I'm against that bill because, we think that you should do whatever you want with your property. All right, and then if I vote for that bill in committee, that's going to be a strike against me on property. And then when I vote for it again on the floor of my chamber, you're going to get scored on that one again. Yep. Other questions? Yeah, come on. You guys are all supposed to raise your hands and say, "I want to volunteer and be elected to be an applicant." Come on.
Rich,
All right,
in relation
yeah.
to that, what about someone who votes to get it out of committee in order to ensure that it gets a full floor vote in order to kind of get that out? I mean, that's a sort of a maneuver that sometimes some legislators will say, "Oh, I already opposed this bill, but I wanted to get it out there to make sure
because it deserves a floor vote." So sometimes a person will vote for a bill on committee and then they'll vote against it on the floor. Could be for many reasons. One, they could have voted for it in committee so that it gets to the floor, so that there's a recorded vote on the floor. It could be because they think, I'm not really sure and I don't want to be responsible for killing this, so let's take it to the floor and let everybody else take a look. Could be for any number of reasons. Or could have been it was amended, they changed their mind. Or change the bill, or they change their mind. You know what? Your vote's your vote. And if you vote, one way or the other way, you're going to get them both recorded. Yes, sir. No scoring on the governor. No. He would be zero vetoes in the most legislatively locked down 8 to 12% scoring Democrat. No, I mean that's a bad score. I mean there were, and he has the ability to veto pieces of stuff too. So no, that was a fail. Okay. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Maybe we need to get the Republicans to lockstep in the 88 to 92 range.
If we could get them all in that 88 to 92 range, man, then I would no longer be doing this stuff because I'd go back to my life. All right, last question.
Quickly in response to that, if Republicans were lockstep, would be no different than the Democrats. Just a thought there, but Rich,
But if we're 92, that's a pretty good lockstep.
Well, yeah, the question is all right. This gets into the question of right. I mean, I think you're joking. I mean, statism is statism. Whether it's statism from one perspective or statism from another's perspective, it's still initiating the force of government on people, and that's what we try to measure. Yeah, question.
Would you talk about how effective Principles of Liberty was in getting kicked off that House floor by Republicans who didn't want those reports distributed because it made them look bad?
No, I'd rather not go into that. If you want some war stories, definitely give me a shout, and I'll, but but yes, yeah, we are effective. You measure effectiveness by your friends and your enemies, right? So we have some of each. I'll leave it at that. If you want more information, talk about that. All right. Yes, one last. All right. Yeah. Great question. How can people help? You know what? Just sign up for our emails. Go to our website, read our principles, read our stuff. If you see us doing a training class, come to one. But really just get engaged somewhere, somehow, whether it's on your street, whether it's with your legislator, all right? Even if you got a Democrat legislator, all right? You can engage them. Look, when last year they were doing a bill to run mandatory collection of DNA for misdemeanors, right? Spit on the sidewalk, we can take your DNA now, right? Your dog bites somebody, we can take your DNA now, all right? There were two people down there testifying against that bill. One was the ACLU. You know who the other one was? Me. Now, I don't hang out with the ACLU all that often, but what's the point of that? The point is that we can find common principles, even if your legislator is a Democrat and you're not, you're a libertarian or whatever. But the key is can you find that principle and then hone in on that and say, hey, I thought you guys were about liberty. Or, hey, I thought you were about, don't say property rights, because they'll look at you like, what? All right, but, personal freedom or whatever. And find those principles and try to have that conversation. You can, people can volunteer to help us. And we get you to one of our trainings and you can do that. Go ahead and contact your legislators, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. Contact them, email them, call them, whatever. That stuff does make a difference. You can talk to my wife afterwards. Since she's an aide for Harvey and Lambert, two legislators, she can kind of give you the inside scoop on that. That stuff does make a difference. So definitely do that. Engage in that way. And then bring people to stuff like this is another way. Yeah. All right. Anything else? I want to honor our time.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.